The only thing crazier than my haircut are the Power 4 conferences leaving the NCAA, and they're going to. This is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. That's Christian Rao of Locked On Kansas State. Thanks for making our shows your first listen every single day. And when you work for the Savannah Bananas in their broadcast department, you get a perm. That explains what's happening here today. It will be happening for months to come. We will start with the Power 4 leaving the NCAA. It's not such a bad thing. And there's actually legislation. There are politicians that are helping this occur, specifically in the state of Tennessee. Will the Big 12 leave the NCAA? The answer might be yes. But then recently, conferences have gotten together and decided that, hey, if you're a school in our league and want to sue the NCAA or sue us or sue this new governing body, we will kick you out. This dictatorship of league officials is destroying even more of what we loved about college football. And then Kansas State will win the Big 12 championship in football. Let's land the plane soft and easy. Yes. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. This is wild. Christian, when I texted you this, when the news came out today, I thought, man, I needed a contender to help go over this, the future of the Big 12. Somebody who's been in the Big 12 for a while. Kansas State fits that bill. The first thing that stands out to me are Power 4 teams based on a Tennessee NIL law having the authority to basically say no to the NCAA. There was a judge in Tennessee who said, this was House versus the NCAA. In the wake of that, a judge who said, hey, if the NCAA tells you to do something, I, the government, can overrule them. This law, you don't have to abide by the NIL laws of the NCAA because they're not exactly compliant with the United States government. I know what you're thinking out there. That's a lot of jargon and mumbo jumbo. What we're able to do is break it down. The government is telling schools you don't have to listen to the NCAA, further taking power away from that governing body. And Christian, making it almost inevitable that governing body's power won't exist much longer.
Yeah, stop if you've heard this one before. The NCAA's authority is crumbling. They're losing its enforcement power. And that's what seems to be happening with this new legislation even more. I think we've continually to ask about getting a new governing body for college athletics because the NCAA is just not doing it right. And I think we can speak for the majority that we are looking for something different. And even the main governing or the whole world is looking for it with this new CSC that's starting to be evolved or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I mean, you talk about states like Tennessee who are now writing some laws to bypass NCAA rules entirely. And that opens up another can of worms. This is something that is because of this new settlement that has yet to be passed. The judge keeps pushing it back, and the NCAA is playing chicken with this judge, a federal judge, and it's a bad idea. It's a very bad idea. The interesting part here, though, and you really dig into it, is, I mean, could teams leave? Could they leave the NCAA? Could they leave conferences? I mean, it could come down to be a really big crap show when it's all said and done.
I think we're in the middle of that crap show, and Ross Dellinger has been all over this. He says in layman's terms in his most recent article, the law is a launched missile toward plans from the NCAA and power conferences to police the revenue-sharing era of college sports, taking aim at athlete compensation cap, the severe penalties for rule breakers, and the policies that prevent phony booster-backed name, image, and likeness deals to players. So in essence, this is, again, the law, the governor of Tennessee who's mixed up in the middle of this, saying, look, whatever the NCAA tells you, especially the new governing board, you don't have to listen to them. You don't have to abide by NIL rules. There doesn't have to be a cap. If the NCAA comes down and says, hey, we're going to start regulating pay for college athletes, schools don't have to heed that as per the United States government. So, Christian, if a guy with a gavel in his hand that can send you to jail for life or exonerate you for the rest of your existence is telling these schools, you don't have to listen to the NCAA. My question then becomes, why listen to the NCAA? Is there a point to keep them around from now on?
This is one of the biggest reasons why I think the settlement of the House versus the NCAA settlement has yet to be passed as well. And with this new legislation, this new thing that Tennessee is putting out, and I think that we're going to see more states follow suit as well. I think we're entering a point, if we haven't already, Drake, where we're entering really an inflection point with college athletics when it comes to this new way of living, this new way of where we're at right now. But when you're talking about paying athletics, you're paying athletes, and then you're trying to put a cap on it. That's where we get into this hiccup and we get into this handcuff situation, because then you're talking about wage suppression, and then you're talking about that's illegal. And when you're talking government against the Sherman Antitrust Act. Now, we have some bigger names in the CSC, in the NCAA that's trying to get past it with this antitrust kind of thing. They're hoping that if we voluntarily agree to this settlement, then we can get past it and hope for maybe some MLB baseball antitrust rules. But we're just not at that right now. So I think we're at a really important time in college athletics, something that's been building up for maybe the past 3 or 4 years since the whole NIL world has really took and blossomed. And I think it's going to go down. I think we're in a waterfall effect right now. I remember just at the beginning of the offseason last year when there was all this talk about more realignment, and the American Athletic Conference, one that's obviously not a Power 4, Power 5, stuck together. They had that kind of that agreement where they all stuck together, had the member statements coming out. I think we might see a waterfall effect that pops up to the Power 4 and Power 5 because of something like that is talking about this settlement right here. If you don't follow suit, you're out. And I think you're going to see some member statements about multiple teams standing put and saying, we stand with the Big 12. We stand with the SEC. Really interesting stuff going on.
Yeah, let's go there now. In the wake of this ruling, and as it's been exposed, we learned about the House settlement, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who still have a ton of questions. Me too, by the way. Yeah. I can't even begin. I've read through a whole lot of the manuscripts. I've read through a whole lot of how the laws are written, and they want to be, utilized, but it still just gets confusing. And here, power leagues are putting the hammer down by threatening to kick schools out who don't sign a contract that combats the governor of Tennessee. This is the era we're living in college sports, and this is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State crossover. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is where I go to make money. The NBA playoffs are in full swing. Every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. They make it easy to stay in the game. FanDuel, before tip-off, live, player props, same-game parlays. Fans have even more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Which players are showing up at the biggest moments? Nikola Jokic didn't, so now maybe SGA can, and you can bet on his player props and track his trends to build your next bet. And a $200 bonus, that would help you. You get that in bonus bets if you hit your first $5 bet. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Go to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. That's Christian Rao of Locked On Kansas State. Christian, insanity in college football. There's a new quasi-governing body. Ross Dellinger, in a recent report from Yahoo Sports, talked about the SEC, Big Ten, and ACC making a bold and unprecedented move by creating a binding document that will require member schools to waive their right to sue over the enforcement of new rules in college athletics, such as NIL. So what this means, to break it down a bit, is if the NCAA comes out and says, hey, a $500,000 cap on NIL, then the conferences are saying, hey, we're going to comply with this new college sports commission who's trying to fix the Wild West of college. We're going to comply with this. And if you don't comply, if you try to sue, we will kick you out of our conference. That's how Dellinger reads it. That's how I read it. They're going to send around a contract that, in essence, shuts everybody up from complaining just to appease the bosses.
Yeah, and to me, can we say this is a double-edged sword? Can we say that there's maybe some good things to this and maybe some not? Are we okay that right now, where we're standing at this moment? Because there's times where you look at these Power 4 leagues and they're coordinating this new enforcement, and the one thing that's doing And I think we said this earlier. It's just showing that the authority of the NCAA is crippling. There's no enforcement power for that governing body. I think that expands that even more. I think the conferences are now seeing that they have more of a marketing type of, ammo in their back pocket with these networks compared to the NCAA as a whole. I think we all know that, especially right now with how the Big Ten and SEC is leading the way, unfortunately, with ESPN. But then also at the same time, if you're going to make a force type of, blanket statement saying that you will follow suit or you're kicked out, to me, that's not a good idea, because then you're asking about power conferences, who, by the way, we're already at 4 now, no longer at 5. So that's already going down. They're fracturing internally. And this pushes to that new thing that Nick Saban talked about a couple of months ago. This potentially opens up that door, opens it wide open for that breakaway league, that premier league down the road. I really don't want to go that path, but if you think about it, it really does set it up there. If you don't like it, leave. Okay, well, if you're leaving, well, then we'll just start our own league. And if you talk about maybe like big name teams, and I know we're on the Big 12 show, but let's think about if Ohio State didn't sign this and they were told to leave. Fox Sports isn't going to let that happen because of the Ohio State-Michigan game. So if they decide to leave, they're going to do a premier league. They started off. This could be dreadful for not only the Power 4 schools, but all 133, 134 FBS schools, Drake.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head here. It's double-edged sword. There are some good things. What if this college sports commission comes out and caps NIL at a certain level, the same way the NFL has a salary cap? What if that commission does some really good stuff? However, I don't think just because they're doing some good things, we have to handcuff ourselves to them and promise to shut up and take it no matter what moves they make. This is groundbreaking and honestly legally contentious. A document that would bind institutions to that CSC, even if their state laws contradict those policies, just like in Tennessee. If there are worker laws in your state that allow a free market, but then the CSC says no. What I don't understand, I know you're not, neither of us are reading the law books and taking the bar every day here, but I don't understand how a school would find it advantageous to sign a piece of paper saying, I waive my right for representation by my own government. I waive the rights given to me by the government, and that's what conferences are asking their schools to do.
Yeah, the way I understand it is the reason why Tennessee went ahead and did this themselves, because they think that eventually down the road, after this settlement happens, when the NCAA gets out maybe scot-free or maybe whatever the case may be, with, if you want to call it scot-free, it's a $2.6 billion payback. But once that's said and done, I think that they think that the lawsuits are going to go towards the states themselves. So I think Tennessee's trying to get a step forward on that. I've also read in that state settlement, that state law by Tennessee, that if a federal law would be passed, it would supersede that Tennessee law. So they're looking for a federal thing to be passed for the NCAA. I think it's just mainly to protect the state of Tennessee. That's why I think other states are going to follow suit by this. But when you're talking about the CSC and them talking about setting a salary cap, doing things like that, Drake, to me, it goes back to that Sherman Act. How can you be a governing committee? And we've had committees in the past as well that haven't worked. We've seen multiple committees in the past that just haven't gone that way. But if you're going to make a decision saying you shall have just this amount of cap room, I feel like we're in the exact same position that we are right now when it comes to wage suppression. If you don't have a collective bargaining agreement, if you don't have a union, which would most likely mean, to my understanding, of course, you'd have to employ these college athletes, which sounds like none of these programs want to do, then you're in the exact same situation you are right now, but you're just pushing the NCAA to the side. Could be a good thing, but it doesn't really help move the needle forward.
Yeah, this move to me further solidifies a notion that the Power Four is, in essence, forming their own governance structure through the CSC and slowly utilizing that to pull away from the NCAA in full. So it goes back to our original conversation a little bit by saying, look, the NCAA is not against the CSC, the College Sports Commission, necessarily. This is it's an added government body almost. But also, if the day comes and we say, hey, this CSC's got some pretty good ideas, why don't we just utilize them instead of the NCAA? I think we can get there. It's just a question of what if they don't? And what if they're violating Sherman? What if they're violating what college athletes can get? And then again, there's stability in this. That's the point of this, where the college leagues have come together and said, hey, if we have a true governing body, we will find some sort of stability. If there are rules about NIL, if there are rules that can be followed that even supersede the government, then we'll have stability. But Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, stability can cap your ceiling. That's what we're doing here. We're using the word stability to talk about how we're going to cap the ceiling of what an SEC player can get paid, of what an SEC player can do in the transfer portal. And maybe that's my biggest concern here. Why would the SEC ever want to be involved with something like this if it's going to start capping what they can give their players when they can give their players more than anyone else?
Yeah, and it also opens up the elephant in the room as well. I mean, there is going to be a time and place where the cap is just too low for somebody to get that competitive edge that we've seen in the past before all this stuff happened, when athletes were getting paid in the past before all of this NIL and things happened. We're going to be taking a step to the back if that happens. Remember SMU? Remember all that stuff that happened back in the years ago, Drake? That could be right back in the forefront if there is a cap and saying, when it comes to these NIL rules, a clearinghouse is going to have to make sure that this is something not just football related, but maybe a marketing kind of thing if you get an NIL deal. And if it doesn't work out in their favor or they don't like this type of deal, that player can't play until it's a renegotiated contract. You really think that these NIL people, these people that are not connected to the program itself, that are willing to spend their money to help their program, their universities, are going to let a CSC, the NCAA, or any kind of governing body say, how are you going to let me spend my money? I can't see that happening. So I think we're going to be at a standstill at that situation. I think that's another reason why we are stuck right here in this right now situation of not having a settlement being done. Now, they talk about the roster sizes being the reason why, but there's a lot of other reasons being taken care of there. And then with this CSC, it sounds like a great idea. Don't get me wrong. It sounds like a fantastic idea because I am not a fan of the NCAA any way, shape, or form. But it just seems like it's missing a lot of pieces. Maybe we just haven't heard enough. I think this is just new things that are still breaking out, and we're learning new things as we go. And maybe I'm missing something because there's a lot of reading to this. But as of right now, I think there's just a lot of things that are yet to be unsaid and yet to be taken care of to me to be excited about a new commission coming in. We've had commissions before and they haven't worked out.
If none of that makes any sense to you, the listener, I get it. I understand in full because it's crazy. It is, if I can make it a thesis, the government and college power conferences saying we don't like each other and want to do the opposite of one another moving forward. Coming up, your team, if you're not a Kansas State fan, wants the opposite of this. K-State's going to win the whole conference. This is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State crossover. Christian Rao of Locked On Kansas State. We've had this conversation in the past, but now we've gotten through the spring portal season, and we see Kansas State, who finished in the bottom half of the Big 12 in the transfer portal rankings, which, hey, not always the worst thing in the world. There's some positive attrition there and a whole lot of players coming back. If the statement is Kansas State is going to win the Big 12 championship, can you defend that?
Yeah, I absolutely can. And it's not about the transfer portal rankings because I personally think they killed it in the transfer portal. And one of the biggest reasons why they killed it was not many important players, if any important players, left in the portal. They had retention was absolutely amazing.
I thought Avery Johnson was going to Tennessee.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those delusional Tennessee fans really thought that was going to be. Come on, man. He's got his own strawberry lemonade NIL. It's delicious. It's great. I had it myself. And he's not going anywhere. Tennessee couldn't make sure they have that strawberry lemonade the way they do at Avery Johnson. But no way. Absolutely. He was not going anywhere. I don't think that was even a thought, to be completely honest. It was fun to have some conversations with those Tennessee trolls on Twitter X, though. I will not lie to you, Drake. But talking about the transfer portal, I think they hit the nail on the head at every position group, especially wide receiver. A lot of people that like to have the argument, and I know you had it on your show talking Big 12 rankings, and I'm going to call you out, Cam Stewart Baylor. I heard that conversation talking bad about Avery Johnson. But the reason why he didn't have such a great season last year, in my opinion, was he had a subpar wide receiver group. I truly think that's going to be a game changer this year. They went after it in the portal. They added some size. They went for absolute size. Jaron Bradley, Jaron Tips. They went after some really big dudes, and they've already have an excellent tight end room that led the nation in red zone touchdowns. Now you add some size to do even more in the red zone. Avery Johnson, a dual threat quarterback who started the season 7-1, had some injuries towards the end of the season. I don't care what anybody says, he was not 100%. And then Dylan Edwards, I think, is one of the most electric running backs in the Big 12. This offensive loan right there, just talking on the offensive side right there, they're going to be in a really great spot when we're talking Big 12 championship contention. And for the record, might I add before I give this mic back to you, we will not have just one Big 12 team in the college football playoffs this year. We will have two. We will have two.
Hopefully three. Come on, don't sell us too short.
At least two. At least two.
There are the weapons. There's Chris Kleiman. There's continuity. I think the way that Kansas State played the transfer portal was perfect. I've waxed poetic about them. Iowa State, Arizona State, BYU for all being very selective. Again, positive attrition. Look, if you want to leave, there is the door. And we don't really need to take that many new guys because we don't have that much to replace. I think what we're missing here a bit is the favorable schedule. It's not the worst schedule in the world. Yeah, you got road games against Kansas, Utah, and Oklahoma State, who all might be good. But last year, they weren't. Those were all going to be, they can be really strong. And then they weren't. And then TCU, Texas Tech, those are some key home games. I do circle, though, the Iowa State game off the rib. You can lose that game and still go 11-1. How much weight do you put on the game in Dublin, Ireland? Does that decide the season for one of these two teams?
Oh, I don't think it decides the season, but until the game's over, I think you put all weight in it. There's no doubt about that because it is the standalone game in America, in the universe, Drake. Yeah. It's not just for the Big 12. It is the opening game for college football for the 2025 season. And I think you have to put every stock in it. And this is an opportunity to silence critics if you're against Avery Johnson, silence critics if you think Kansas State only can get as far as playing Rutgers in the Rate Bowl. This is the opportunity to say that Kansas State is a national title contender, at least a college football playoff contender. It's hard to say in May that you should win the national championship, but I think it's fair assumption to say that you can make the college football playoffs because just like with basketball, now that we're at this 12 team and eventually going to be 16 teams, if you get to the dance, anything's possible. We saw Arizona State. They should have made it another round after playing Texas. We saw that should have happened last year. We saw BYU should have been in the college football playoffs last year as well. If you make the dance, anything is possible. And I think that stands with the 12-team playoff as well. But yeah, when you look at this game against Iowa State, myself and Nick Maravitz have had quite the conversations over on Locked On Kansas State doing crossovers, the host of Locked On Cyclones. I think that's going to be a coin flip. I really do. I think it's going to be a really good game. I think Iowa State has reloaded quite well as well. Wide receivers could be an issue with Iowa State because of their everybody leaving to the Houston Texans apparently. But other than that, I think this is going to be a really good game to start off. And when you look at the schedule, you talk about some of the road games. You talk about, some of the favorable schedule. One that you didn't mention, and I'm surprised out of all people who didn't mention it, the one that scares me the most is at Baylor. Baylor's the game that is, and it's in the middle of the schedule. That's the one that I'm kind of banking that one as an L for Kansas State.
People love those Baylor Bears. I'm leaving myself out of that. I'm recusing myself from the Baylor conversation. I've been bitten too many times by. They were my, Big 12 champions a couple of years ago. In a year that they were coming off the title, returning a whole lot of their team. They finished 6-6. They kind of a falling out at the end of the season. Finished 6-6, and I would be surprised, but they're one key injury away from having that happen again. That key injury would be Sawyer Robertson. Now, you can't judge a team off of a fake injury. I know. But I'm holding out on the Baylor Bears so far. I think there are a couple of other Big 12 schools to parody this league who will step it up and play a major role in this conference at the top when the title race heatens up. Speaking of that, who do you think it will be? Who are the schools that you circle, whether Kansas State plays them or not, that should be in Arlington alongside the Wildcats when things kick off in December?
Yeah, if I had to just pick one, and this is the one that I've been sticking through this entire offseason, nothing's changed so far, it's BYU. And it's because that we don't have them on the schedule. And I think BYU has done a fantastic job what they did last year. I think they're going to figure out their offensive woes that happened towards the end of the season last year as well, going into this new year. I have Kansas State finishing the season 10-2. And I have them taking on BYU in the Big 12 championship. That is my early prediction. It hasn't gone anywhere since the last time we spoke. And as of right now, if I had to give two losses, I'm going to say one of the losses to Kansas State is at Baylor. And then I'm going to say, to me, I feel it's weird, but either one of those against Oklahoma State or against Utah, those two road games back to back towards the end of the season. Look, we've been watching the Big 12 for years. We know how this goes. Last year in the media poll, Arizona State finished last. In 2022, when TCU went to the national championship, they were predicted 7th in the Big 12 media poll, and they found themselves in the national championship. There's so much parity in this league. Oklahoma State and Utah will not be at the bottom again. It just won't happen. They will find a way to, maybe they won't be at the top, but they're not going to be as bad as they were last year. They'll find some improvements. And I think that makes me a little nervous towards the end of the season because they'll seem like teams that might figure it out as the season progresses. So that's where I got my two losses for Kansas State. 10-2 though, against those BYU Cougars.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting finish of the season if those two meet in Arlington. And 10-2 is probably Big 12 championship worthy. That's the way the league goes right now, and it's the way the league will go probably for the two teams that square off in the championship game. I also don't hate the idea of a loss at Utah. If there's one school in this league that will have a bounce back year, I don't think Kyle Whittingham has lost his fastball. Mike Gundy might have. He might have. I don't think Whittingham is there yet. I'm not doom and gloom about him yet. This could be a year in which Utah gets ultimate redemption and sneaks up on a team like Kansas State or a couple of others in the Big 12 and finds themselves in the hunt later in the year. Christian, where can folks, listeners of Locked On Big 12, find more of your work?
Well, you can always find me on Twitter X at LockedOnKState. That's where I'm dropping just little nuggets about recruiting, all that good stuff, and just everything about the Cats. I'll always talk in there, and then you can always find me on Twitter at on YouTube at Locked On Kansas State, or everywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. We are bringing the Kansas State Wildcat coverage like no one else. Your team every day.
This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. A crossover with Kansas State and Dose Grande.